What is the secret to knowing what your purpose is in life? To knowing what it is that you're actually supposed to be doing here? There's a reason why you're here, right? Do you know what that is? Are you solid and concrete and sure of what it is that your purpose actually is? And you know without a shadow of a doubt that you are doing what it is that you came here to do. If that's true for you, congratulations, my friend. I applaud you. If you are a little bit on the fence and you're like, I think I know what it is that I'm supposed to do, but I'm not sure if I'm actually stepping into that and living in that place most of the time, how can I know what my purpose really is? And if you have no idea what your purpose is and you've been searching for it and curious about it and longing to know, well, I'm going to share with you some insights into my own personal story today, my friend, that I hope will give you not only some inspiration, but also some clarity for your individual story, to know what your purpose is and for you to live out the reason why you came here. Sound good? Come on, my friend, we're going to dig into the soil of purpose together. Hey, welcome back to my channel. My name is D. Grant Smith. I am the growth farmer for personal development. I use a combination of storytelling, spiritual insights, and lessons learned along the way of life to illustrate some very practical, very simple, and very powerful ways to transform your life, your relationships, and bring you more peace, joy, and fulfillment in every area of your life. You can get more from me, including some awesome and dynamic courses on confidence, kindness, self-love, and a whole lot more, plus some amazing kick-ass stories that will revolutionize your life and entertain you at the same time, all at growthfarming.com. Today, we're going to talk about purpose. We're going to talk about mission, the reason why we're here. Each one of us came into this human experience for a reason. Do you know what your reason is? I used to think that the reason why I came to Earth was question mark, question mark, question mark. I thought that, I'm supposed to get a job and hopefully I'll get married and hopefully I'll have a family and hopefully I'll be able to do some things that I want to do, but, I don't, all this uncertainty. And I did get married and I did have a career and I did do a whole bunch of things that I told myself I wanted to maybe do when I was younger, but none of that stuff stuck around. None of it was solid. However, I do see at this point in my life, 41 years old, that even the things that didn't work out the way that I wanted them to were actually all designed and intentional for me to grow into and become the person that I was destined to be, to live out my purpose. And I share that with you here because maybe there have been some things that have happened in your life that went completely differently than you wanted them to. Maybe there were some relationships that you foresaw lasting your entire life. And maybe they lasted for a handful of years. Maybe they lasted for a couple of decades. But suddenly, the relationship was over. Or maybe the relationship had been ending for a long time, and because you wanted it to last forever, you held on to it until it slipped permanently away. Hey, that's okay. I've had that experience too. Both with friendships and with marriage and with other romantic relationships. People that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, but for whatever reason, wasn't in the cards. And you know what? Coming to an acceptance of that and allowing myself to look at, okay, but what did I gain from this experience? I recognize what I lost. I lost this ideal of this relationship that I thought I was going to have. But what did I gain? And when we look at things from this perspective, we can see that all of the things that took place inside those relationships were actually all preparation for us. They were intentional. God had something up his sleeve that he was working on and using that relationship to reveal things in us that needed healing, that needed growth, but also aspects of ourselves that have everything to do with our purpose. Now, I am going to bring all this stuff back to purpose because that is the focus and the subject here, but I want to illustrate something to you in a couple of my own personal insights and personal stories that maybe will shine some light on your story and give you some perspective and look at your own journey through a different set of lens. When I was in college, I was going to this very charismatic church, and we were, the kind of place where, and I was one of the people that would go up to the front and dance around during the worship service, and we had praying in tongues or however you call it, and people falling on the floor. It was kind of a crazy experience, but I got so in that world that was a normal thing for me. And around that time, I had this feeling inside of me that I was going to do some sort of mission work, and I was going to get sent out into the world to spread the gospel. Well, in thinking from that perspective, I decided to add an extra, I don't know, semester or two to my college experience, and I took on a missions minor. Now, I went to a Christian college, Abilene Christian University, and I majored in electronic media because my vision at the time was to be in radio broadcast, and I was. I spent 22 years total in radio broadcast. I had a syndicated radio show that lasted for 16 years called The Appetizer. I got to meet and talk with and interview a wide variety of people, both in entertainment, in music, as well as dignitaries and people that were newscasters and people that were speakers and people that were world changers. Interviewed countless best-selling authors, all from doing work in radio and broadcast media. And I'm so thankful for those experiences. What those experiences gave me were avenues and practices and training in how to have interactions and conversations with people and learn from their stories. But the reason I mentioned the whole thing about missions is because when I was taking on this missions minor, I had to take, I forget what the name of the class was. I think it was Bible missions or something like that. But I had this professor that every single day he just stood at the front of the class and he would basically give this hour-long monologue. But at some point during the talk, he would always say this one phrase, and I didn't understand what it meant, and it started to drive me nuts. But he would say, "Let's discuss the implications of this." Well, unbeknownst to me at the time, I started doing something that I now do all the time that is a big part of my purpose, storytelling, way back in 2003. Just as a way to entertain myself in this boring ass class. So I've actually dug this up. And I think I've got about 6 or 7 episodes in here. I'm not sure if you can see this, but I created a cartoon. I called it Wyman in the Bush, because that was the first name of my professor. Now, in this comic strip that I created, Wyman was the hero. His last name was Walker, and so it was like a Walker, Texas Ranger sort of thing. And if you've ever watched Walker, Texas Ranger, you know that Walker concluded every fight scene. He took out the guy that, the bad guy with his spinning back kick. That was his signature move. Well, in the comic strip, I was the bad guy trying to take over the world, and Wyman would show up to stop me. And what did he do to foil all of my plans? He said his key catchphrase, "Let's discuss the implications of this." And that was where my comic character lost his crap and couldn't go any further. Now, I mention all of this stuff because I was doing this at the time because it was A, a hobby of sorts, B, it was a way for me to pass the time in this boring class that I didn't really have any interest in being, but I was doing it because it was part of my minor. And C, it was a way to entertain everybody at my table, because once they saw me drawing these comics and writing some, humor into this whole thing and creating a storyline dynamic around it, everybody wanted to read my stories. Everybody wanted to read my comics, and it kept them entertained. Now, I didn't know this at the time, that I was actually doing something to pave the way for something that I would do that was actually a part of my purpose. And it wasn't until I got into a relationship with an amazing, beautiful, incredibly inspiring person after I got divorced that changed my life forever. And I felt this desire to start writing stories for her in a very romantic sense. Now, I'm a very romantic person, incredibly passionate, and so romance was just flowing out of me. And on a regular basis, I was writing these love stories. And one day she asked me, "Hey, what would it be like if you wrote a story that wasn't romantic? Like, I love all this stuff, but like, can you write something that isn't about, us living in some other period of time where there's all this romance? Like, could you write something that's just a different kind of story?" I thought about that for a little while. And I decided, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to try to write a story that isn't me, creating some sort of romantic, love story, fantasy kind of thing. And really, that's where my storytelling journey began in the capacities that I'm doing it now. And so, as I allowed myself to go in this different direction and write in a different way and write just from my heart, but not have to incorporate other people that I actually know into the whole storyline, I began to explore themes. I began to explore other ideas. And from that, God began to communicate with me in a different way. So I'd go for a walk and I'd get this scene in my head and I'd just entertain this scene all the way through to the end of the walk. And I'd come home and I'd be like, I've got to write this down. And as I started writing it down, then this other story came to me. And as I'm writing the story, I'm realizing in the moment, there's more to this story than just what I think it is that I'm writing down. And after I would write the whole story and I'd go back and I'd read it and I'd share it with my friends and with other people and started to build a name for myself as being a storyteller, I began to see that what was actually taking place, I was teaching love. I was teaching spirituality. I was teaching God. I was teaching personal development through the power of story. And I wasn't consciously aware or trying to do that in the moment, but it was what was coming through me. It was what I was channeling. And I recognized that, yes, that desire to spread the gospel in a non-religious sort of way, the gospel of God already lives within us. And it doesn't matter what your religion is. God is already a part of you because that's who you are. That's where you came from. That's the truth. We are all pieces of God. Spreading that gospel and using story to do that, to illustrate these powerful spiritual and personal growth dynamics through fictional narrative, allows the reader to be able to understand their own story, allows you to be able to understand your own story in a completely different way than just laying out a list of 7 to-do things or 7 ways to amplify your relationships or 5 ways to increase your connection with God. You can list out all that stuff and it's all powerful and it's all wonderful, and there's great value in this self-help personal development book world. There's also incredible value in reading something that seems to be entertaining, or at least take your mind and your focus off of what's going on around you, but inside that story, for God to show up and to illumine something in your own personal story that you weren't aware of. And now suddenly that story means so much more to you than it did at the beginning because you're able to see yourself in that story so much better. Isn't that why we love the movies that we love? Isn't that why our favorite characters are our favorite characters? Because they point back to us. That's what I do with my storytelling. Here's a story I would really encourage you to check out that's case in point for this. One day I sat down to write something very different than what I'd written before. This was about a year ago. I wanted to know what it would be like to try to write a murder mystery. I'd never written a murder mystery before. I had no idea really where to begin. I watched a couple episodes of True Detective, great show, at least the first season is anyways, and I felt inspired. Okay, I'm going to try to do this. And a scene came to me, and I just kind of entertained it for a little while, and I started writing it down. Well, every day for 5 days, I wrote the next part of that story, and it ended up turning into something completely different than what I thought. My murder mystery ended up taking a very metaphysical twist, and I began to see how so much of, actually, when we go back and look at any sort of murder mystery altogether, there's a story beneath the story beneath the story, even in that. And so I called this story Hope Flows, because inside this story, there is a very, very small town in Nebraska where things used to be really vibrant. Used to be a lot of life, a lot of connection amongst people. But something happens. And not only do the people begin to change, but nature does too. There's a long span of time where it doesn't rain, and all of the water beds and waterfalls dry up, and the ground is just begging for life, and so are the people. Everyone is depressed. And added to that, good people seem to be going missing or found dead, and nobody knows why. But for some reason, everything seems to point back to this one guy who actually is a really, really good dude. But why would all of this bad stuff point back to him unless he has something that he's hiding, even from himself? That's the story behind the story inside this story called Hope Flows. And I encourage you to check it out. You can get the digital book and the audio book packaged together because I like giving the best of both worlds. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this story and how it shows you aspects of yourself that maybe you hadn't even considered before or dug into. Let the light within you, which is also a part of this story, illumine something in your story. And I hope that if anything from this video today, maybe you have given yourself an opportunity to look at your own story a little bit differently. Some of the things that maybe you did years ago that you weren't aware of doing for fun might have something to do with your purpose. And even conversations with people that you love, even relationships that might have shifted or changed, could have given you clues about what it is that you're actually here to do. And if you have gotten some insights and maybe a little bit of a glimmer of perspective that's different than what you had when you started watching this video, drop down in the comments and let me know. I'd love to hear your story. I've got all of my contact information and ways that you can connect with me, learn from me, and grow with me all in the description below. I appreciate you being here. If you haven't done so already, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and share this with your friends because we all want to know what it is that we're supposed to be doing here. We all want to live our purpose. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to live my purpose and shed and spread love and light into the world through the power of story. Blessings to you, my friend. I love you, and I'll see you again soon.